Alrighty. Well, welcome everybody. We're so excited to get started today. My name is Tim, and I work on the marketing and product marketing teams at Opkey. We're very excited to have all of our guests through Zoom and also LinkedIn Live, or if you're watching this later on demand, thank you so much for spending some time with us. So today we have a very special chat between two fellows. John Bruce is the Vice President of People, Technology, and Innovation at OneDigital, and Gavin Niermeyer is the Director of Account Management here at Opkey. OneDigital is a massive organization, runs a lot of Workday modules. So they've scaled Workday tremendously well over time. And we'd like to think that Opkey's been a piece of that success. So I'll leave it at that and leave the full time for our wonderful guests to chat. So yeah, why don't you guys get started?
Sounds great. Thank you very much, Tim, for the intro, and John, appreciate taking the time.
No problem.
Okay. To get moving here, John, just hoping to get a bit of a foundation on your background, quick overview of OneDigital specifically, and of course the role that Workday plays in your business and has played in your business for quite some time.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So, as Tim mentioned, I'm Vice President of People, Technology, and Innovation here at OneDigital. And that kind of means I have oversight for our people tech stack, how we use AI initiatives, bring those to enable our broader people and culture initiatives, but then also, Workday and corporate compensation, some other functions that ultimately roll up to me. I've been in the people tech and analytics space for about 16 years now. And the last decade's really been exclusively focused on Workday. And through that journey, I've served various roles. I started off as a client, then went over to a deployment partner and did some really large global deployments. And, I've deployed Workday for 2 million workers in 84 countries. So just a few places. And then came back to the client side because I just really enjoyed helping clients grow and scale. And I've been at OneDigital for the past 3 years and been really great to be part of that growth. OneDigital is really interesting as a company to me. We started off primarily in the employer benefits space about 25 years ago, almost 26 now. And over time, we've really diversified our business from to be primarily employer benefits to really everything employers need and employees need too, in the sense that we do wealth management, we do 401(k) administration, property and casualty insurance, we have a PEO organization. So we like to think that we have everything a business could need to be successful and to also service their employees. And a lot of that has come with rapid growth, right? So we went live with Workday in 2019. And at the time, we had about 1,400 people. And as of this morning, we have 5,200 employees. And so, that's was a
Wow. Yeah.
4x. Yeah, it's about 4x in a matter of 6 years. And we continue to have that large growth trajectory, and there's a big chunk of that that's organic, but then there's also a huge part that is M&A. And as an organization, we probably pick up anywhere from 20 to 30 small businesses, small to medium-sized business a years that
Mm.
we kind of walk up to and say, hey, you started this because you liked selling insurance, or you wanted to do wealth management and you built this company, and that's great. But now you're spending, what, half of your time, 30% of your time focused on the back office operations. And you're not doing the thing that you love, the thing that you started. And so we have a really great back office. Sell your business to us, and then we'll take over those back office ops, and that's kind of how it goes. And so it's
Sure.
really helpful. And then Workday in particular has been critical in helping us scale that way.
Yeah. Yeah. That's I mean, quite a lot of growth, first off, right? Congratulations. And I'm also sure for you, there's a calculus of the strategy and how that changes as your doing a lot of this M&A activity, of course, the organic growth as well. Added employees, uh, obviously always a positive thing, but we know that in the back office, from our perspective as technologists, that changes the way that we, uh, that changes our approach a bit as we grow. So, with that in mind, with the aggressive growth trajectory and sort of, your the next 3 to 5 years, I would assume that the strategy is largely the same. Um, how do you think about Workday specifically scaling with the organization, and what does that look like in practice for you?
Yeah, I think when OneDigital made the decision to go to Workday, a big part of that was around the scalability, right? I think if you scan the environment, Workday has, more than half of the Fortune 500, Fortune 250, all the way down the chain, and that holds true, which means it's suitable for large organizations, which meant that, it was something that could grow with us. But that doesn't change the fact that the way we did business when we were 2,000 people and primarily employer benefits is the way we still need to do business today, right? It's changed radically. And I think, if you look at a really good example of that is, 3 years ago, we added the projects and project billing modules, right, to support our HR consulting practice. That way we can track project time inside of Workday. We can do the billing and invoicing out of it. And so, as we add the project time, and that creates an ability for people that had time blocks. And if you have an hourly population, do you really want the hourly population adding time block? And so, I think the biggest kind of growth, or the thing that continues to change with scale, is how aggressively we need to do negative testing, right? Like, not just positive testing, but negative testing. And for
Mhm.
those of you that are on the call that aren't familiar with that terminology, like, it's really easy to say, okay, we're going to test that someone that's doing consulting that's assigned to a project can log time. Great, that works. One of the things that often gets overlooked or missed is this concept of negative testing, which is, okay, great, it works for the people it's supposed to, but doesn't work for the people it's not supposed to. And are we opening up another set of problems by fixing the thing we're doing today, right? And so that's where, as organizations scale, as organizations add more modules, as organizations change configuration, like, that need to be able to do that rapidly and efficiently, it just becomes more and more critical. And I think we're at this really big inflection point, particularly in the Workday space, but in the broader tech space with all of the AI stuff and how rapidly AI is transforming, right? A year and a half ago,
Mhm.
ChatGPT was the best model, and now Claude's the best model. And what's going to be the best model tomorrow? Like, nobody knows, right? And so you need to be able to pivot rather quickly as you're doing that. And I think that's where that testing automation becomes just a critical requirement, if you will, for most businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're leading into, sort of the next question, or the next set of questions, kind of naturally. Like, so you're spot on about positive and negative testing, right? This is something that, of course, through the evaluation and in your time as a customer here, we've talked a lot about, and helped you achieve it at a little bit more of a broad scale. We do this a lot in the platform, just through data handling in a certain business process or scenario becomes, a little bit easier than trying to do it from a manual perspective. Um, I hear what you're saying about all the changes that you're making, and sort of your rapid pace of innovation. About 18 months ago, you started to go out into the market and evaluate solutions for test automation. Of course, you're here today. You landed with us. Um, was testing was this use case that you're describing the one that pushed you towards starting to evaluate automated solutions for testing, or were there other use cases as well that came into the picture when you started to say like, okay, let's at least take a look?
Yeah, I think it was this kind of perfect storm of a bunch of things coming together. So I think there were some misses that, me or my team made in testing that kind of created this need for more thorough and completeness in testing, right? And look, I talked about how I did Workday deployments. I've spent a lot of time in different customers' Workday tenants, and I've never had a single customer come to me and say, "Man, John, I wish we spent less time testing." Right? Like it's just I've never had someone
Sure.
say that to me, right? And it's true for good reason. I think, so there were situations like that. There was also, OneDigital, the first 4 or 5 years we were on Workday was really oriented towards like, yes, we added some modules, but a lot of what was going on was kind of keeping a lot of the work was keeping the lights on, staying, up to date with required updates and, basic, really limited regression testing, right? Let's check our critical integrations and hope the non-critical ones don't break.
Yeah.
Which, for most medium-sized enterprises, unfortunately, is something I've heard a lot in my travels. And so there was that, and then we were really entering this stage where, my chief people officer challenged me to say, look, like AI is transforming the way we do business, and that's great. But also, I want us to have one of the best Workday tenants in the ecosystem. And so I
Mm.
want us to be at the cutting edge of everything. And like, there's going to be stuff we can do in Workday, and that's great. There's going to be stuff we can't do in Workday, and that's okay too. But the stuff that we can't do in Workday is still going to be critically dependent on Workday's data, right? And if our configuration is flawed, our data is going to be flawed to the nth degree. And
Hmm.
so there was that piece too. And, because we've got, at any given time, 5, 6, 8, 10 projects going where we're doing transformation inside of Workday for various things, taking on new functionality, deploying new modules. There's all of that. There's just not enough capacity for testing, right? And so then the question becomes, okay, do we add a couple people? And then if we add people, are we adding people that are, specifically like testing? Or are we adding people that are analysts that are expected to test as well? Or do we look at tools, right? And if we're looking at tools, great. What tools make the most sense for us? And, 9 times out of 10, if it's for a very distinct purpose, right, like testing, I'm going to choose a tool over a person because I can scale a tool a lot more quickly than I can scale a person.
Hmm. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. What did that process look like? So, say let's stay on this use case for a
Mhm.
second. You know, it, maybe you're trying to keep up with the features that are being released in Workday at some given frequency. With the folks that you had on the team, like what did a typical seasonal Workday release look like for you from a testing perspective before you started
Yeah,
down this path?
yeah. I mean, one, it was all manual, right? And I go back to that scenario where it really was it wasn't thorough, right? It was what are our 5 to 10 most critical integrations that like disrupt the business if they fail,
Yep.
right? Like what are those? And then, okay, what's the next tier if we have time to get to it? And then what are the business processes that like really matter the most day in and day out in order to make sure things are right? So like what's going to make sure somebody gets paid right and on time? What's going to make sure someone's taxes are taken out right and on time, right? And
Yep.
and so, there was some real base regression testing that was done, a couple processes here or there, a couple thing, but one, it's ad hoc, so it's really the luck of the draw, right? Your sample size is very, very small. And then, it's, I do it this way, they do it that way, in Workday, unfortunately and fortunately, there's no one way to do anything, right? And so because there's different clicks to get to things, different ways to do things, you're not really, again, that thoroughness and completeness of testing. It's impossible unless you have a team of 20 people, and even then it's pretty darn hard. And that's kind of what it is. And so it increases risk, right? Like it really adds risk.
Yeah.
Limits our ability to look at the optional stuff, which is where, you really start to get that flywheel of value really starts to spin up, because the required stuff you get, right? The optional stuff you start to say like, well, shoot, like why can't I use this, right? Or something like simple, like, a really good example is we just turned on a month ago, like the Manager Insights Hub. And Workday released that, I think, 2 years ago. And that was one of those things that just sat on the backlog. And I'm sure there's people on this call right now listening in that are nodding their head just like you are about,
Yeah.
the backlog keeps growing, right? Because when you think about the value, like, is testing valuable? Yes. But what is the opportunity cost of you executing those tests versus you doing more strategically valuable things for the organization? And that's where the real cost of testing sits beyond the risk, right? Is that, like my salary is a sunk cost to the business, right? But if I'm sitting there testing things, that's far less valuable to the business than me solutioning how we use new things that make self-service easier, that enable better transactions, that make our data cleaner, more consistent, more complete, and ultimately open up those AI initiatives that we're trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's giving you like what I'm hearing is, I think this is the promise somewhat that AI and the solutions like this broadly, right? Not in an Opkey specific context in this case, but that's the promise I think that we're hearing, right? If you go scroll on LinkedIn or you read articles or whatever it is, right? Whatever your preferred mode of learning is, we you hear pretty often like this is what these solutions are meant to unlock
Right.
for leaders, for technical folks, for functional folks across the board. It's meant to like really allow you to step back from the tedious work and be able to do, some of the more creative, strategic work that's going to move you forward, and put you in a better position as a business, over the next however many years, right? As you can adopt some of these, it's
I'm
innovation allowing you to adopt
right.
further innovation, essentially, right?
Right. And again, I really look, I spent a short bit of time at DoorDash, and culturally, like philosophically, they use this concept of this flywheel, and how there's these three different values, core values: customers, people, and technology, that create these, like, they keep creating more and more efficiencies off each other, right? Like it loops through customers and it gets faster. Then it loops through processor people and gets faster. And then it loops through technology and it keeps getting faster as it goes around, right? And I
Mhm.
think, when you think about innovation like that, that's where testing, right? Like testing has the potential to be more of a bottleneck, in my opinion, than change management does, right? And I think as
Yep.
people become more tech savvy, and I think one of the big benefits in my mind for how much AI is transforming the businesses and itself right now, the pace at which it's moving, is that it's really getting people used to change in a way that they weren't used to before. And so people
Mhm.
are less frustrated when you move the cheese, right?
Yeah.
Than they used to be. Like now it would be like, I remember, 2 years ago, if you moved the cheese, people would freak out. And now it's like, oh, I found the cheese. It's over there. Great. Right. Like I had to look for it. And so I think
Yeah.
that, it's going to create this wealth of opportunity for innovation and rapid change. And I think the next biggest obstacle behind that is really testing, right? Is really the only thing worse than no change is a change that doesn't work, right? And then you lose credibility because it's with any system. It's oh, it's hard. I don't like it. I'm not going to do it. The platform stinks, right? Like that's again, I've been in people tech for a long time.
Yeah.
It's true. It's true. When I go back in my career, we've deployed benefits administration platforms. We deployed different platforms. I've deployed Workday, and it's if it doesn't work right the first time or the 50th time, it doesn't matter. You lose your credibility like that, and people get a sour taste in the mouth, and it's so hard to recover from that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Especially, I'm sure you're right. Testing is a bit of the engine that I that I think allows like creates the power behind allowing you to do change management maybe a little bit more rapidly. But if I think about the way in organizations that I've been in as a person in the organization where HR is making changes or HR tech is making changes, um, there's a lot that goes into it, man. Like, it's not it's not just the change in the technology, it's not testing the technology, but it's like, you have an announcement, you have a rollout, you probably have some internal like webinars and education and like so I think sometimes when we think of testing, we're thinking about just the Workday platform in this case, right? Or the platform of choice, but we're not like we're not widening the lens to see like, oh, they're like real things that John is going to go
Mhm.
do in front of the entire employee base at OneDigital. And if it doesn't go well, like you're right? Like that is potentially the result. So um
Right.
it's interesting to extrapolate that.
And it doesn't even need to be something as extravagant or innovative as, new functionality, new configuration. I think we've talked a lot about things that are simple that everybody goes through, like open enrollment, right? I think that's a
Yeah.
really good example of, look, we're in the benefits business. Like I hear all the time how hard benefits is right now because renewals are going up. Like everybody's having difficult renewals, rates are going up, people are changing carriers left and right because they're trying to preserve the price points they can so they can still provide benefits for their employees while also, not just getting their bottom line destroyed. And that creates risk, right? Like sure, like we're swapping medical plans and we're doing the mapping, but we need to be able to test, all of the end-to-end scenario of open enrollment. And like there's a lot of time that our benefits team, who is arguably the most thorough testing population at OneDigital, spends on open enrollment testing alone, right? Going through every possible scenario and walking through it and making sure it behaves as expected. And that's if we don't change anything, right? That's if we don't have new carriers or we don't have new plans and we're not adding integrations or we're not adding benefit types or we're not changing coverage rules or, EOI requirements, whatever it is. And that all still has to be tested every year as if it's a new deployment because it kind of is, right? Like every year you're creating a new plan year, you're
Yeah.
enrolling it. It's all the new enrollment. And like that really adds just so much complexity, and it's all manual for most organizations. And when you think about most Workday customers, that's the time that they always get people into Workday is open enrollment. There's usually like two
Mm.
times, three times a year where your user activity traffic spikes right after you close a merit cycle when everybody's going to look at their comp statements, Usually the second, third week of January when everybody's tax forms get released, right? People want their
Sure.
W-2s. And
Yeah.
then and then open enrollment. Like those are really your three big times to drive traffic into your platform. For most businesses, that's when they see the big spikes in Workday traffic. And so, like, this is an opportunity where you get almost all of your workforce or a large percentage of your workforce into the platform. And this is your chance to remind them, hey, like, Workday doesn't stink, right? And if they're trying to enroll in an HSA and it's not letting them enroll in whatever the maximum is because it thinks they're in a different plan that doesn't allow an HSA because you didn't test it right, well, you've squandered that opportunity. And nobody want like you will there is plenty of opportunity to make mistakes in Workday configuration. You don't need to make more opportunity for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So well said. So that brings us back to, I mean, we covered a lot of use cases, a lot of philosophy. You were in the market, you were looking at solutions. What what led you to trust us as the solution of choice here?
Yeah, I think the first thing we did was really focus on who has, documented established relationships with Workday, right? I've been around the block a few times. Every single vendor will tell you they integrate with Workday, and what that means is just fundamentally different across the board. And so we were looking for one that had that like designation with Workday as a partner. And that really narrowed it down pretty quickly to a couple. And one of the things that really attracted me to Opkey was this concept of, you know, AI test automation where, you look at our transactional history and use that to build your test data sets, right? And so,
Yep.
you're looking through how we've executed change job as an organization, for the past 5 years and saying, great, like sometimes this is there and sometimes that there and sometimes that's there and sometimes both of these are there. So let's generate test cases off of that, like so that it's not just me saying, oh, let's test everything at once and like miss some of those subtleties and nuances, right? And I think, really the ability for us to create, end-to-end coverage across all of our processes was critical. And one of the other things was that you all really came to the table to help us, deploy pretty rapidly. And you had a lot of good, what's the word I'm looking for? I felt that you guys were also very aligned to Workday's release cadence, right? Like you all weren't, it didn't
Mm-hmm.
feel rushed, right? When we went through the release cycle, it didn't feel rushed. It felt like, okay, you were on top of it, you were aligned, you knew, and then we were able to say, okay, like here's our annual calendar, here's, because we do 5 different open enrollments a year for different populations. Here's where we're going to need to make sure we're focusing on that and really having good technical and functional teams that understood Workday as much as your platform.
Sure. Yeah. Well, that's great to hear. We're obviously very happy to have you on board and to continue to support you. What does life look like now? We're about a year in. Um, we talked a lot about what it looked like prior. Um, Maybe talk me through a use case or two. We've talked through several: seasonal patch,
Yeah.
change, open enrollment, like pick one and just like what does that look like?
Yeah, I think one of the big ones for us is occasionally if we're onboarding a new acquisition, we'll bring their benefits into us. It doesn't happen as often, but occasionally we'll do that. And that's where that negative testing just becomes paramount. Like that's when we're doing something like that, like that's what keeps me up at night, honestly. Like did we miss something in negative testing? And so being able to, create automated test cases for every single benefits group, right? and have the platform, once we build out something, run through all of the test cases to make sure that they can't enroll in those plans they're not supposed to enroll in, or that they can enroll in the
Mhm.
plans they're supposed to enroll in, right? Like that's been a critical use case for us. I think the release management is great. Like we really feel comfortable to the point where we, don't even worry about it. We cycle through integrations, we cycle all of our business processes, and then we say, okay, what's optional? What can we do? Right. And then we're not lingering on the stuff we have to do. We're lingering on the things we want to do, which, again, just really amplifies the ability to innovate in this space.
Yeah, yeah, that's fantastic to hear. We have about 15 minutes here. Do you have any tips or advice or words of wisdom for folks that might be listening on the call or might listen to this at some point, any point, just on the evaluation of solutions like this in general, why it's important? Yeah,
Yeah, I think first and foremost, almost everybody wants to be growing, right? So if you're growing and you can get some kind of automation that carries the bulk of that regression testing, like that really helps you scale. I think, when you think about, for us in particular, the acquisitions, it doesn't really increase our testing effort when we have an automated tool because it creates the ability for us to click a button and then it just starts cycling the test cases. I think, when you're evaluating, like look for where it hurts, right? Like that's what I tell people all the time, like where does it hurt the most? And start there. And, sometimes you have to say,
great
okay,
advice.
where does it hurt? Yeah, I mean, it's just simple,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like,
right. Yeah,
and
doesn't have to
sometimes,
be.
and
Yeah,
sometimes you look at it and where it hurts the most can't be solved right away. And you're like, okay, where does it hurt next? And work through the list to figure out where you're going to get value. One of the things that I've talked about a lot with, more junior level resources is this concept of the testing mindset. And, early in my career, testing was really just a checklist I went through, right? Like it was like, yep, 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 yep. And I was sticking to the script, right? And I was just checking the boxes to get it done.
Mhm.
The firms that test well view it as a strategic capability. And I think, that mindset shift really changes the way you do business, and it changes your trust and credibility inside the organizations you're operating in, because there's fewer misses, there's more thoughtfulness in the configuration, and there's more, you're looking at it from more of a business lens than a technical lens, right? You're looking at it more in terms of how are my end users consuming this product I'm giving them. And I think, when you view testing as a strategic capability, it really kind of creates that opportunity. I think, when you're thinking about platforms and vendors, again, the first and foremost thing, if you're a Workday customer, is you got to find somebody that's Workday certified, right? Like, don't even. I think the Workday certification really carries a lot of weight because like that's an established relationship, and it's pretty critical there because again, anybody will tell you they integrate with Workday, and anybody who's been doing this long enough knows that if you ask 15 people if they integrate with Workday, they'll say, "Oh yeah, we integrate with Workday," and that means 15 different things. Uh,
Yeah,
and
yeah, of course.
find a platform that understands Workday, right? Like make sure they can help you get automation quickly, and they have because they'll have standard Workday cases, and that'll help you ramp up fast.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, those are great words. And you're right about. I'll double click for 15 seconds on the last piece. Um, the partnership with Workday has been so important to us, so transformative for us. Just in the sense that, like, to your point, we can build truly fit for purpose technology across a pretty wide breadth, right? Like test testing automation, like functional test automation, classically, is something that we do quite well. But the partnership has allowed us to expand our capabilities. In some of the process mining examples that you're highlighting here, being able to even just give customers insights on security domains, groups, roles, segregation of duties, like how those affect each other, and sort of mix and match with each other, how business processes are affected by those things. We wouldn't have been able to develop that piece of the technology, especially as rapidly as we've been able to, without that partnership. So, yeah, I mean, you're totally on point there. And I see that Tim is back in here. I think we may have some Q&A. Tim, what do you got?
Yeah, well, so we have a couple questions. I don't want to cut you off, so first I want to make sure that you've asked. If
No,
anything else comes up, we can totally make some time for it.
no,
Yeah,
sure
so we
thing.
we
Let's go.
we have a few questions that were submitted before today from Workday community members who we know, and who we circulated the topic to. So I'll start with those, but again, if you want to take it in any direction as something that you think is important to address, please feel free to do so. So here's number one. Uh, at my org, we don't have the cadence of M&A that it sounds like you do. Um, we do an average of 2 acquisitions per year, but my org also has much more limited resources. I'm interested in whether you've chosen to run systems in parallel for 6 months after the acquisition event, or incorporate processes piecemeal from the get-go, or take a different approach. Maybe it depends on the size of org or the type of acquisition. How do you approach, especially with limited resources?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I'm going to put my consultant hat back on and just say the short answer is it depends, right? I think it depends on the type of the deal. It depends on when the deal is occurring, right? I think there are situations where, again, we do a lot of benefits business, and if we're closing on a deal 10-1 and it's a company that provides some kind of service to companies when they're in open enrollment, maybe we do a TSA for them for 4, 6 months, to keep them running in parallel systems while we don't disrupt them during their busy season. I think the fortunately and unfortunately is that it's not a one size fit all. It's on a deal by deal basis. But I think, the argument that resource constrained organizations, this is an easier argument to make because, again, this is a resource that scales with the business as opposed to, having to consistently add headcount to grow the team, right? So there's always tools will always scale more than people will.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, Gavin, did you want
Just
to add anything?
Yeah, just from like on the resource constraint piece of this question, we are a technology company. That's is what we strive to be, right? Like building technology that folks on client side can use quite easily, learn to use, get enabled on, be able to perform, any and all of these use cases that we talked through today. However, depending on how resource constrained you may be, um, Opkey does offer opportunity for managed services as well around certain critical events throughout the year. So, again, sort of depending on the resource constraint and how that affects the testing part of this question, not necessarily the M&A cadence part, that is an option.
Thank you for that. All right, we have one more question, much shorter, but maybe it'll take longer to answer. We run Workday and Oracle. How do you think about testing across multiple enterprise apps and also third-party apps and APIs? So, John, I assume that you have some career experience with this, but if you're not able to speak to that or only part of it, that's fine too, of course.
Yeah, not real, really. Um, yeah, I don't have any good insights to say there. Sorry.
Okay, no worries at all. Yeah, I know it's a workday focus, so every org is
Yeah.
different. I think the audience appreciates the honesty. Um, well, yeah, I'll just check with Gavin and John again. Is there anything else you wanted to mention before we wrap up? No?
I
Okay,
think,
sounds good.
again, just start where it hurts, right? Like that's what I tell people all the time. Start where it hurts and go from there.
Yeah, that was really
Yeah,
helpful.
yeah, for
I'm gonna
sure.
put that on a billboard. Um, well, all right. Well, I just wanted to say thank you so much, John, from the entire Opkey team for spending time with us. Thank you to our audience and our future audience for on-demand viewers. Just wanted to briefly mention you can learn more about Opkey at opkey.com. We have lots of Workday specific products that we've built over the course of our partnership. And also, we have an offering for those that have joined us live. So, on the thought that you can't improve, as John mentioned, without knowing where you actually stand, we have an exclusive offer for the attendees today. Our team is going to perform a Workday Change Readiness Assessment for free with you. So, the result of that assessment is that you'll receive a report which you can share with your team on what your org is doing well and where you can improve to prepare it moving forward. So, I will leave it at that. And thank you so much for joining us, everyone.
Thanks for your time, John.
Yeah, thanks for
Thanks,
having me.
folks. All righty. Talk soon. Take care.